was already done. I hope you all know what is Gratisol and why are we here for. And I'm Natasha. I'll just introduce myself in a short before I proceed into taking the session. I have 12 years of experience in IT firm and CSV. I've started my career into testing, development, and then moved on to computer system validation and went ahead and gaining experience under the same tree. And I've worked as a analyst, consultant, and moved on to the lead and management role for consulting firm. So this is my short introduction. And I have worked with both service providers and product company for the same computer system validation under pharma domain. So this is my quick introduction. And I'm associated with Gratisol as a trainer for CSV, GAMP, GXP trainings, etc. If I can have a quick introduction from the people around so that I know what experience you carry and what you expect out of this training, that would add a little value into explaining about the introduction to CSV. Um, can we start with Paresh,
Yes,
if I pronounce it right?
correct. I will just unmute them. Paresh, you can unmute yourself and give your quick short introduction, and then I think we can take ahead from there.
Sure.
Thank you.
Hi, Natasha. This is Paresh here.
Hi, Paresh.
Yeah. See, presently I'm working in like in Juventus in Pharma as a IT system administrator.
Okay.
But I thought like here the documentation process is very high, so I thought like let go with this certification. It's very good for me. However, I do have some IT background, so it will help me while doing the validation for the like related to the pharma.
That's right.
Like, adding this CSV, it's more value for my resume and for me also in the future. So due to that, I've been joined. So how you feel that is that good for me to go for a CSV?
That's perfectly good. When you have a good knowledge on CSV, as it's more of theoretical and more of, understanding regulations, and when you gain it with the IT experience, that works a long way in your career development. Yes.
Yeah, the reason is like moreover I'll be in more than IT, I'll be in some documentation. So like I have some idea for that. So I thought like let's go with the CSV.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Can
Yeah.
move to
Let's
next.
move on. Annalyn, can you introduce
Hi,
yourself?
hi, Nadesha.
Hi.
Hi, actually, I'm working as an PLC and SCADA developer. So now I'm trying to change my stream to CSS Computer System Validation Engineer. So I'm trying for the new job. So that's why I'm thinking to take a course.
Perfect. A career
Okay.
change in this new year.
Yeah.
Go. Go.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's move on to Ravikumar. Ravi, you there?
Yeah, hello.
Yeah. Hi, Ravi.
Yeah, Natasha, good evening. This is Ravikumar. Currently, I am working in pharma domain.
Okay.
Right now, I am working in a R&D department. It is a huge documentation which is having, and we are outsourcing this computer system validation from others.
Oh, okay.
But why can't I learn from myself? And it is value addition to my career and my CV as
Mhm.
well as.
Oh, so you work as a developer or into testing platform?
No,
What do you
platform is
do?
this is pharma R&D research and development.
Okay.
Yeah,
Core pharma. Okay.
yeah,
That's great.
core pharma. Thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ravi. And we'll move on to Kishore.
Hello.
Kishore. Yeah. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Kishore.
Hello.
Yeah, you're audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Kishore,
Yeah,
go
good
ahead.
evening,
Go
ma'am.
ahead.
This is Kishore. Yeah, this is Kishore. I'm working in Sun Pharmaceuticals in a validation department. Hello.
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I'm looking to CSV. So nowadays most of the systems are changed to automated processes. So I want to learn the computer system validation.
Indian Pharma. That's great. Welcome aboard. And let's move on to Arun Ramkumar.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Hello, everybody. Hi, Natasha. This is Arun here. I work as a validation lead at OpenText for pharmaceutical companies across the world. So I worked for pharmaceutical clients from US across to Europe and Australia as well as India. So because I'm a validation lead, we directly deal with content management systems to handle the application for these pharmaceutical companies. And because I'm a validation lead, I think CSV is a definite value add in terms of my career growth as a validation lead. Um, that is the reason why I'm presently here.
Perfect, Arun. Yeah. That's great. Thank you. And let's move on to Gayatri Kishore Kumar. It's not
Yeah, hello
Kishore, it's
Natasha. This is
Kishore.
Gayatri.
Hey, hi, Natasha. Hey, I'm Natasha. Yeah, hi. I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Gayatri Kishore Kumar. Hello, are you hearing?
Welcome. Yes, I'm
Hello.
hearing you. Welcome to the training. Yeah. Just a quick
Yeah,
introduction of
I
yourself
worked.
would help.
I worked in Pharma domain in LIMS team, Laboratory Information Management System.
Hmm.
I kept my resume in Naukri. They are asking along with LIMS CSV also. That's why I'm interested to learn this course.
Perfect. Let's move on to Lakshmi. Lakshmi Nar. I'll stop with Lakshmi. I don't want to pronounce your name bad.
Sorry, myself, not Lakshmi Narayana. I'm Hello.
Yeah, you're audible, Lakshmi. Yeah.
Yeah, currently I'm working with the Pfizer in production complaints department. So I have opinion to change my path to validation. So I'm looking for the CS, especially in that. So on that basis, I came to here to know about this.
Perfect. Thank you, Lakshmi, for your introduction. And Parisha. Let's move on to Parisha. Parisha, you there? Hello? Um, okay, let's move on. I don't think, yeah,
I think there is
I
some
think,
mic issue with the Paresh. We can just resume.
okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, that's great. Parisha, just go ahead and introduce yourself through
Uh,
text. We will
Natasha,
read
another
about you.
thing. Actually, two session is going on with my mobile
Oh,
also. I'm going to disconnect and I will stay with my laptop.
oh, very busy person, is it? You're doing multitasking in trainings too. That's great. Yeah, go. Okay. So shall we move on? Okay. It's nice that we have people who have pharma background in our session who knows the basics of CSV and GXV, I hope. So this session is just going to be a introduction to what regulations and what CSV is all about. And further, we can deep dive into each of these concepts and aspects as we go on in our daily trainings. That's great. And I see only Anne who has just thought of shuffling to CSV as a career change. Rest all, I think it'll be easy to understand what I'm going to explain. And uh, I have to say this is going to be a really theoretical session, and stop me if I'm fast, stop me if I'm slow. please go ahead and ask me questions wherever you feel like, wherever it's still a gray area for you, or I'm ready to take questions at the end of the session too. Yeah. So with the space, we will start. So I was thinking I should introduce you to Gratisol. Should I still do that, or still can I move on to CSV?
We can move on to the CSV. I think most of them already aware of Gratisol.
That's great. Okay. So do you all have the content with you, or is it that you can see only through my screen that's shared?
We can see only through your screen, Natasha.
Okay, that's great. Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So we'll first move on to slide one. I will come back to this slide two later. So if I'm going to explain that, it's going to be really vague now. So we'll first move on to what regulations is all about. So on a generic term, what is regulations in one word, if anybody can say? Okay, this silence now. Okay, regulations is nothing but laws that we have to adhere wherever it is, on a bigger picture. Okay, so now we're going to look on to what pharma regulations is all about, and uh, what is it all about, why we need those for working in pharma industry, and why pharma industry as such need to adhere to these regulations. So, okay, regulated industry is an industry that's significantly regulated by state or federal government. As I explained, it's a law by state or federal government. So, FDA is the first regulatory body that was designed, developed, which places regulations on pharma industry. Since the industry deals with drugs, healthcare devices, it makes sense to follow rules and regulations. Uh, to further explain the statement, drugs and food are designed and developed for human health, or uh, recovering somebody from illness, etc. So it is very ideal to follow a law or regulation on how to design, how to develop, what is good, what is bad, what is the administrative level, etc. for any drug that is designed, because it involves patient health, patient safety, and the efficiency of drug on people that they are going to take on. So that is that is a key concept where the FDA formed, and that's why FDA is still persistent, or sits one step above all pharma industry to, you know, uh, make rules and amendments to production, manufacturing, designing, developing, or in R&D of drug research. So the third point that talks about life-saving drugs should have highest quality safety built into them and must be effective. Same what I explained before. The regulations are there to minimize the risk to public health and safety. Yes, I hope I explained it in another terminology. That's what is iterated in this point three. Moving on to point four, if suppose there are no regulations or processes that's controlled, that is there to control, what will happen? A small example, we take, if we have a headache or if we have a fever, immediately we pop onto some paracetamol in any form. In the local drug terminology, it's Crocin or Dolo 65 or something. If there is no quality check on these, or there is no labeling of expiry, or the level of ibuprofen and paracetamol that has to go in, that can be taken to our consideration, then what will happen? It is a state of risk for our life, right? And in certain conditions, they would have written that this will affect your liver even if you take more than 4 a day, etc. So if you don't have such um, labeling or such information, it's available to patients, and how you will handle the drugs in your daily life, it's going to be a really big threat. So that is where regulations play a role. So now we're touching on why we need regulations. Um, so if to explain more on the need of regulations, there's an example given here, which is thi- thalidomide tragedy. That's a drug recall due to defect in manufacturing. Um, if I have to explain more on that, um, it is a regulation. It started on a very early stage on development of drugs. After the 19th century, life sciences breakthrough regulation started playing a big role in pharma, physiology, and chemistry industry, which has laid a foundation. So I would say the need of regulation started from Second World War, but the example that's given here is little later. So the first event of the need for a regulatory body happened in 1937, where over 100 of people in the United States died of diethylene glycol poisoning. That's following the use of sulfanilamide elixir, which used the chemical as a solvent without any safety testing. So they've used a chemical as a solvent without testing. This facilitated introduction of the Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act with a pre-market notification requirement for drugs in 1938. Okay. However, we have in countries that are where we have poor regulatory environment, even recent medicine designs have contaminated with diethylene glycol and have killed patients. So this is the first event of the need of regulations. And the example given here is the huge catastrophe that happened. The example that I quoted now was a little lesser on the impact of people. Now, the event that we're going to talk about is a second catastrophe that influenced the development of medicine and regulations far more than in than ever in the history of disaster. So that is thalidomide. Thalidomide was a sedative and a hypnotic that first went on sale in Germany in 1956. That is between 1958 and 1960, it was introduced in 46 different countries worldwide, resulting in an estimated um, count of 10,000 babies being born with milia and other deformities. That is it is a congenital deformity in which the hand or feet are attached close to the trunk or the body, and it's being grossly underdeveloped or absent. So this condition was a side effect of the drug thalidomide taken during the pregnancy. So the role of this disaster in shaping the medicine's regulatory system was very huge. This is, so anytime when you talk about regulations and why you need regulations, this thalidomide tragedy plays a big impact on why there should be a huge system that should stand above people who creating drugs and researching on drugs to have rules in place. The last point here that talks about maintaining records to demonstrate the above regulatory about the regulatory inspections or documents that is done to ensure your requirement is available or it is already documented signed by an authority. So these are the calls that is specifically asked for by FDA or any regulatory body on pharma industry. So that is why we need a CSV and all those in place. Now, I'll move on to the page 2, which talks about global regulatory compliance landscape. So now we know what is regulation and why we need regulation. So this slide will give you a big picture of different regions in the world around and what are the different regulatory bodies that we have. So far, we talked only about FDA. The FDA was the base that was started, and slowly they, they identified the need of regional differences on regulations and statewide implication that is required for regulation. So that is when all these regulatory bodies came into picture. For example, if you take Canada, you have Health Canada. If it's US, it's FDA. If it's UK, it's MHRA, which is Medicine and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. If it's Japan, it's Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare. And India, you have a regulatory body. Does anyone know what's the regulatory body of India? Can anyone unmute and say the regulatory body of India?
Schedule H,
Sorry?
Schedule M and Schedule H.
No, I'm talking about the regulatory
This
body for India.
DCGA.
It's CDSCO, CITCO,
Sorry,
Central Drug Standard, Central Drug Standard and Control Organization. That's the one for India. And for Australia, it's Therapeutic Global Administration, Goods Administration. And if it's China, it's National Medical Products Admin. So these are the major giants now that we have who make regulations for each countries and states associated with them. So now, do you have any questions here, or we'll move on to the next one? Here, I see few terminologies mentioned here. PAHO and WHO. WHO, I hope all know, it's World Health Organization, who conducts meetings and discussions on how health aspect is considered or impacted around the world, and they take major decisions on, as now everybody knows with the COVID cases and how WHO plays a role in defining the code for the COVID virus and how the impact is going to be, etc. So um, PAHO is nothing but a Pan American Health Organization. It is nothing but it's just like a World Health Organization, but it's more associated to only American countries, or that's why it's called Pan American Health Organization. And if you see in the slide, you see CDER, CBER, CDRH. Those are all nothing but a part of FDA, which is nothing but Center for Devices. If you take CDER, Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, CDRH is for Devices in Radiology Health. CBER is Center for Biologics and Research. So these are regulatory bodies for each specific area under FDA. So that's why they're called under FDA. Uh, any questions here, or did I miss to explain anything here? Okay, if nothing, I'm moving on. So we saw what is regulation, why we need regulation, and what are the different regulatory bodies around the world. So from there, we will park and move on to what CSV is. Okay, I hope you all can see my screen on CSV. What is CSV basically? It's nothing but computer system validation. So why are we talking about CSV when we are talking about regulations now? So now we all work for IT firm where we deal with computer systems. So and in a pharma life chain, um, in this event, in this era, I would say computer have replaced a lot of documentation effort in terms of paper validation that was done very previously, and records kept in sites. All those are replaced by computer systems now, which carry huge amount of pharma data, patients information, medical research combinations, etc., etc. When you look in from pharma perspective, so everywhere we use computer system to deal with data. So that is why now we talk about computer systems when after regulation. So we all work for IT firm, including me. We all do it, and CSV plays a key role in pharma industry because every computer system used across the pharma life chain. Okay, across the pharma life chain, in the sense, I hope, from identifying a disease and identifying a drug till releasing it into sales and marketing, and exporting it or selling it from any authorized site that they have. The entire process is governed by computer systems, and so now the FDA impacts or places regulations to on how these computer systems have to be maintained, developed, and what are the different aspects that these computer systems or the applications that run within the computer system should play. So when the statement of how it has to be done comes, that there comes the term validation. Validation in a general term is nothing but you giving an approved evidence that something that was asked for is given on board whenever, wherever. Okay, so that is a key uh, understanding that we should have on validation. Now, what FDA states about validation, we'll see. This uh, definition is very important when you run across your career chain wherever you uh, go work with. This definition would be a key term that you should always remember and have it in your head to work on every day on your documentation or support into application or products. So so validation is nothing but establishing document evidence, as I told earlier, which provides a high degree of assurance that a specific process, not only process here, it can be product, process. Somebody's pinging me from, just a minute. Any questions, or did anyone ping me? Okay, yeah, I'm moving on. Yeah, which provides a high degree of assurance that a specific process will consistently produce a product meeting its predefined specifications. That consistently produce is a very important term. You're giving a documented evidence which will state at any given period of time that system will perform the same ask in the sense the same requirement. There'll be no change. Even if n number of changes or n number of data is going to come and play a role or impact in that system or application, it will not change the way the system is supposed to work. That is the key term that consistently produce means there. And quality attributes in intended operational environment. So the intended operational environment is nothing but the environment where in which the system has to be placed, so it will perform the same action throughout. So there's another statement that restates this FDA definition. That definition is given by FDA. So that is why it is specifically asked to keep in mind. Key things that you have to keep in mind are it, validation is nothing but a documented evidence which will help a system to consistently produce the predefined specifications and quality attributes in the intended operational environment. Now moving on to the next statement, which states requirements are defined in advance and that the system has been developed and tested to prove that these requirements have been met, and proof that each step has been completed is provided by objective evidence in the form of documentation. It's just the same reiterated, but where it states requirements are freezed way back so that we will know what to build in that system. And after that, we build and test it. And for every build and test, we have a proof in the form of documentation. Okay, this is just what it is explained, but from a more on IT perspective to understand it better. Let's move on to why we need validation. Now we know what is validation, why we need it. I think I touched this a bit early when I was introducing on why CSV when we talk about regulations. We'll just walk through the points to prevent software problems, bug enhancements from reaching production environment. So all our applications that are run in the computer systems for pharma has different environments. If you all know, if you have worked on in different platforms, so every application that runs in a production environment, say suppose an application um, deals with interacting with uh, efficiency of molecules or drug research. If there is a small bug or a problem, what will happen? There will be an impact on the development and research of a drug, right? So, so to ensure there is no software problems in those systems, or if any bug happens, also there is a controlled manner in which it will not affect the real application that is running in production environment. So, to prevent all this, we need validation. How we do this, we will discuss in later stages on in detail how this can be handled. But these are the aspects that will be restricted or will not happen to any system that is having these pharma related aspects into it. So to avoid serious adverse consequences that might arise due to incorrect software functioning in production, as I stated earlier, and it is a regulatory ask. Above all, why we are doing it? It's because FDA had asked you to do it, or your associated regional regulatory body, MHRA, has asked you to do it, or CITSCO has asked you to do it. Give us assurance we can control the aspects of our operation that are critical to product quality, safety, and efficacy, and to avoid huge penalties from regulatory authorities, which can lead to job loss or bankruptcy. Yes, why predominantly why all organizations or pharma industry has come to an understanding that they need CSV is mainly because of the penalties that come from FDA when they audit, or any external auditor that when they audit any computer system in a pharma domain. If they find a finding or an observation or a warning letter is issued, it will go beyond a level where they can stop even producing or developing a drug, which will be a huge, huge, huge $1 billion loss for the company. So that is why we need computer system validation. So now when we'll move on to when validation is performed. We saw what is validation, we saw why we need validation. Now we will quickly see three more: when we need to validate, who to validate, and how to validate. So when we need validation, validation cuts across throughout the system life cycle, I would say. Validation is not something that is equal to testing. That should be clearly understood here. It is not testing. I will explain you why it is not testing. Validation is performed during user requirement. How validation is performed during user requirement? Every requirement defined should be attributable to something on what needs to be done on a system and what needs to be the output of that um, requirement. Um, j- I will go on pause for a minute. Yeah, yeah, I'm back now. So validation is performed when defining user requirement. So your requirement should be clear in knowing what it is required, and during designing of functional specifications, how the requirement is translated into the requirements which is functionally needed in a system, and its risk in developing those functions in the existing application or in a new application. So all external aspects into creating this functional design into a system, we need validation. And risk analysis, yes. During risk analyzing stage, we don't talk only about how we will have risk when this requirement is not met, but how when we develop a particular requirement from a user, the existence of your requirement shouldn't affect the other requirement that is still running. So these analysis needs validation. During design specs, your design should be foolproof and validated to ensure the requirements are translated into the design that is really an ask. During testing and qualification, yes, you need validation when you test and qualify. And during UAT and PQ, yes, during UAT and PQ, validation is required and it's performed. How we do it, we'll deal in the later stage, but validation is required in all these stages. It cuts across every SDLC of IT firm. In certain organizations, validation comes into picture only during the testing phase, which is not the actual validation, I would say. Not only verifying your testing document, signing it off, stating yes, I have validated the system is not the right validation. It is nothing but another extended hand of testing that they say, but that's not validation. If your requirement is not validated, you cannot, go ahead and say your entire system is validated. If your design is not validated, you cannot state that. So all these aspects play a role in the complete validation set. Now moving on to who is responsible for validation. Yes, the decision primarily is on the business owner or business user who needs this system or application. Uh, he's the key, he or she is the key responsible person for validation. But on a bigger picture, everyone should know what validation is and how to validate it. So any stakeholder who works on the SDLC should and adhere to validation. So that's where it states everyone, essentially everyone who is involved in sponsoring, developing, maintaining a computer system requires validation. So now we saw what is validation, why, when, who, and now we see how to validate. This is going to be the big picture of how we validate. At any given point of time, you have to keep this model in your mind. When validation comes, we focus on V model. So this is the key methodology of validation. As we stated already, validation cuts across uh, the SDLC. So if you see from user requirement, that is URS, till you do a performance qualification or a UAT, you perform validation. So we will quickly see what the V model is. And so we first start identifying the business case and develop user requirements. And from user requirement, we immediately translate the requirements, understand the requirement, validate the requirement, and segregate it to functional, non-functional requirements and performance attributed requirements. And once these segregations are done and it's clearly signed off, we consequently do a PQ. PQ is nothing but while testing, we call it as a PQ test or result test. It is nothing but the ask for the requirement is clearly met in the performance qualification that we do. So your requirement should, every requirement should attributably be tested through PQ. So that cuts across. So simultaneously, when URS is done, we start understanding and creating PQ scripts, or it depends on the way that we are defining a validation strategy. But in hand, every requirement should have an attributable PQ done. That is the ask. Now, how are we doing it? That again we will see in the later aspects of this training. Now, next we move on to functional specification. That's nothing but a requirement can be functional, non-functional, and every functional spec will have a number of design features, build features, or how it is going to be built. If it is custom build or a COTS or a small configuration or a patch impact, anything it might be. So every functional aspect should be defined in and documented. As I said, it might be interface specification, business specification, regulatory specification, security. Every requirement should be traced into, or it will be stepped one step down into defining the real functional need for the system. And every functional aspect should have functional testing. Functional testing is a holistic term that I use here, but it will be related to operational qualification. in operational qualification, we focus on how errors are handled, how access level is audited, how data integrity is maintained. So each of these are controls that will be imposed on the functional specification to ensure every function has been validated. Okay, now moving on to design. After URS is done, or a functional specification is identified, then we want designing these functional specs. It can be a design or a configuration based on the ask of the computer system or the requirement. So we design those design specs and configuration specs. It might be a hardware configuration or a software configuration also. So for every design, there should be an IQ. IQ is nothing but, does anyone know? Installation qualification. So every design has to be installed in the right way, or documented in the right way using IQ scripts. So after these comes the build and test. So once you define all this after the planning phase or in the design phase, then it comes to building the real software and testing it. So build and test happen only here, whereas validation cuts across from requirement till UAT. So that's the difference between testing and validation. Any questions here? Or I'm actually done with the CSV and regulations for today. I can go ahead and take questions from anyone. This is that's all that we cover for the first session.
Sure, Natasha. Thank you so much. I think the session was very informative, and I think there are some questions with the participants. If any participants can unmute and they can please speak on with your queries, and we are there to answer their questions.
Hi, madam. It is Narayana.
Yeah,
Yeah,
hi,
hi,
Narayana.
Narayan.
Please
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Hello. Yeah, madam. What